After teaching English for many years, studying language fluency, and observing the methods that my students were using to achieve fluency, I took some random notes over the years which I would like to share here. A really great method to become more fluent with grammar structures is to build stories together in class with your English teacher, or a friend that enjoys learning English, but a native speaker would be best. Taking turns to add a sentence or an idea to an invented story and build the story together. Practice telling stories using past tense constructions and practice talking about the future using future tense constructions. Also, practice talking about what is, i.e. present tense conversations. The present perfect will be used a lot here as well. You could also pretend to have a conversation where you ask questions in a specific tense and the other person answers in a specific tense while they are telling the story. Example, Person A: yesterday I was walking down the street when I saw Tom. Person B: what had you been doing before that? Person A: I had been eating lunch at home. Tom told me about a movie that was playing in the cinema. Person B: did you go and see it? Person A: we were going to, but Sarah called us and invited us to the beach, etc., etc. When you would like to practice speaking about technical interview questions and answers with your teacher for whichever profession you work in, you should search Google for interview questions for front-end developers, or interview questions for mechanical engineers, or interview question project managers, etc., etc. And then get your teacher to ask these technical questions, answer the questions in as much detail as possible, while your teacher hopefully focuses on correcting your pronunciation, grammar, etc. There are resources available like this, for example. Higher level English learners generally have a large amount of vocabulary, structures, patterns, and knowledge about topics in English in their minds. But every learner also has a pile of mistakes inside their mind. By having discussions about a wide range of topics with a teacher who hopefully gives quick but detailed corrections on pronunciation, grammar, etc., while keeping the conversation flowing, these mistakes are allowed to come out when they're speaking. And the teacher's job should be to keep correcting and pointing out these mistakes until the pile of mistakes becomes smaller and smaller. If you find a teacher who is willing to use this method, then you can make big improvements in your speaking fluency. Every lesson should be based on a different topic, topics which are relevant and interesting for the student. Before the class, the teacher and the student would agree on a topic, something about technology, business, culture, travel, etc. Then, a few days before the class, either the teacher or the student can find an article, video, or documentary about the agreed topic. The homework should be done before class, and the homework is this: study the article or documentary as much as possible, become familiar with all the new vocabulary, become familiar with the topic, do some extra research about the topic if you want. This is all about gaining passive vocabulary. The teacher should do this too. And then during class, the job of the teacher is to get the student talking about the topic as much as possible, keeping the conversation going while allowing the student to do most of the talking, at least 80%, for the whole class. This is activating the vocabulary, while the teacher focuses on correcting pronunciation, grammar, suggesting natural language, while also keeping the conversation going. This is the method where I have seen students making the most progress with speaking fluency. The teacher should play a Larry King or Michael Parkinson, basically an interviewer sort of role, but giving corrections on language as well. In lessons with your teacher, just focus on having discussions about interesting topics like American cinema, cultures around the world, business, investing, the latest technology, history, travel, food, etc., etc., holding fascinating debates on a wide variety of the most interesting topics that you can find. Learn about the world through English. Another active output activity that students can do at home is imagining themselves in different situations and then going through the conversations in their minds. Imagine themselves at the hairdresser, boarding a plane, buying a ticket for a music concert, etc. It helps them to spot gaps in their language. One of the most important exercises to encourage English learners to do is the read and explain to yourself method of reading paragraphs of articles, seeing the story in your mind, and then describing in their own words, but still using words from the paragraph, what was said in the paragraph by themselves at home with no teacher, and going through each paragraph of the article like this. It's speaking practice outside of class for free, and they get the chance to use all of the new vocabulary that they have read about. It's just a constant process of receiving passive vocabulary, then activating the vocabulary over and over again, paragraph by paragraph. They also get to practice structures and expressions that they find, and it improves their short-term working memory. It's hard, it might be boring, and there's no feedback from a teacher, but it could be the thing that improves your speaking fluency the most. I had a few students who made big progress with this method. In lessons with your teacher, it could be useful to read a paragraph of an article together during class, working together to understand vocabulary, meaning of expressions, phrasal verbs, etc. And then after doing this, the student can try and recall from memory, not looking at the page, and explain all of the different ideas from the paragraph in their own words, but also using vocabulary and expressions from the paragraph while the teacher helps the student along by mentioning ideas from the paragraph, and then just working through the whole article in this way with the teacher. This is all about the small-scale process of input, output, over and over again. Whenever you prepare for a discussion class by studying an article, you can prepare for the lesson by practicing this read and explain to yourself method of activating the passive vocabulary. And then, when having the discussion during class, you would be activating the vocabulary again. The method of recalling and explaining paragraphs to yourself improves your ability to retrieve vocabulary from your memory faster and faster the more you practice it, improving your fluency overall. The process of retrieving vocabulary and then putting that vocabulary into clear structures to express your ideas is a skill that needs to be developed by more and more practice of the activity. You should also try to retell the story as accurately as possible. When learning a language, try and manipulate the sentence that you are learning in as many ways as you possibly can. For example, can I borrow your pen? Can she borrow your pen? Can they return my pen? Can they borrow my book? Etc., etc. It forces the student to start being able to change structures and manipulate sentences to suit their needs at the time, and makes thinking in that language more automatic. You can read one paragraph and try and explain it to yourself, small scale activating vocabulary, or you can try and read a full article and then try and explain all the ideas of the article to yourself, debating the article with yourself. Without looking at the article, this would be a large scale activating vocabulary. The teacher is really just activating a student's passive vocabulary when having discussion classes, lighting up all the details that have been stored away in the student's mind. The teacher's job is to search around and activate as much vocabulary as possible. Accuracy really comes from a massive amount of massive input. A massive amount of input, reading, listening, gives you a rough fluency. Then a massive amount of this massive input gives you accuracy, because you have just become so familiar with every aspect of the language. Accuracy really depends on the degree of familiarity with the language. The key is to have really engaging, interesting, compelling, passionate, opinionated conversations with your teacher. A huge amount of learning happens when you are emotionally invested. When reading through text, you should always stop and recall the story to yourself every now and then, trying to use the same vocabulary to tell the story. Recalling helps you to retain more vocabulary, and make sure that you imagine the story in vivid, imaginative detail and try and connect it to personal experiences as much as possible. Recalling helps you to solidify vocabulary. To improve writing skills, English learners can use an article, read a paragraph, and rewrite the paragraph as best they can, and work their way down through the article like that, reading and rewriting in their own words each paragraph. This is focusing on improving expression just the same way that the read and explain to yourself speaking exercise improves speaking expression.